Progress report. I've got 3/4 of the wall yanked down, and it created one hell of a mess. The glue didn't put up that much of a fight, really. Some of it was kind of tacky, honestly, almost rubberish. Still got this corner to do, however, my computer desk is in the way, and I can't really move all that because it's glass at the moment. I am going to have to see about taking the covers off all of these, removing the mounting screws. There's an absolute ton of concrete anchors in this wall that have been covered over. You can see evidence where that smoke jack was to all the things I had attached to it. So I actually had to cut off a pair of studs over there that were holding on the old paper towel dispenser. And in the meantime, while I was looking at things, I realized that the boards around the cap, the inside of the ceiling here, are covering up all the electrical conduit. And it was very patchwork, and because I needed to get access to the junction boxes anyway to deal with a lot of the unused wiring that I'm going to be removing, I decided that if I'm going to be doing the walls here, and given how far up the boards have got to go, and I'm basing it on these boards here because those ones down there go vertically. I'm not quite sure how he had this set up. Just looking at the opposite wall over here, we can see that by the time it reaches, you guys can see that, by the time it even reaches up to where the bottom of that board is, it's overlapping this one. Which means if I build my wall up the same way, I've either got to leave this in place and then cut this board here to that height so that it butts up against this. However, these boards are actually offset from the wall by little strips of wood, maybe a 1/2 inch thick, so that these can be routed out on the back to cover up all the EMT. It's really kind of a mess. It looks like he used whatever he had, just scraps of random wood, nailed those to the timbers for the foundation of the house, and just sort of whacked them in wherever they would fit, and then slammed whatever random pieces of wood they had on top over it. And taking all these off gives me a better opportunity to look at how everything has been routed, because a lot of these conduits actually carry power for the outlets in the living room. Well, actually all of them do. And then there's connections for the heater circuits in the living room that I'm going to be disabling and eliminating, because I don't need a whole bunch of 220 circuits running through the conduit here. Hell, I've actually got 220 in that panel over there coming out to a pair of banana plugs. I leave that off for a reason. But I mean, if I wanted to, I've got 220 down here. It's really handy for my mill and potentially for a welder someday. But I don't need it in this room. And these junction boxes are packed. I mean, that one is just absolutely slammed with 120 and 220 connections. And I don't know if you can see it, but that red guy on the left there is connected to a very old fabric-covered neutral with an exposed conductor. It's really, really messy. Like, a lot of good EMT work done, but a lot of just cramming as much as they could get into what they had available. Anyway, I also discovered one of these guys right here is actually live. I don't know what circuit it goes to. I capped them all off with sealing heat shrink with hot glue on the inside of it, so those are all closed off. It looks like this box was originally set up to switch this light fixture up here, and there's a piece of unsecured Romex coming out of this junction box, looping up and going into a little box up here. I'm deleting all of that, getting rid of it. I'm going to take that EMT out all the way to that box there. Unfortunately, I don't know where the heck I put my my good brand new wire nuts. I got to find those before I can start undoing any of the wiring, and then I got to go back and check and see what circuits are actually being used to operate any of this. I have no idea. None of these are marked. I've started marking all the outlets and light switches in this place with a marker back to the service panel. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I am also looking at trying to figure out some places this glue might actually be in the way. Now it's kind of brittle, and I might be able to scrape it off. I don't want to create too much of a mess. I already vacuumed out quite a bit of the inside of the smoke jack, and I don't know what all was in there. I didn't bother looking at it. I just shoved the vacuum in there and went for it. I don't think they've ever actually cleaned out the soot from use of this, because it was, from what I could see in there, I didn't bother shining a light, it was just a solid brick of probably carbon, and they never actually cleaned any of it out. It just collected at the bottom of the chimney base, and yeah, just a disaster. So I cleaned a decent chunk of it out. There's still more, and I know I have airflow out to the outside because I had to add this tape to hold this cover in place, because every time the wind blows over the top of the chimney, it makes this wiggle, or it just knocks it clean off the wall. It's fine if you're watching it. It's very unexpected if you're not. It scared the crap out of me the first time. Anyway, I've got a whole bunch of 1x2x8s sitting in the other room, and I am going to start planning on how I'm going to mount them. I'm thinking I'm going to start at this end here. Damn it. We're going to start from the counter up to the top of the concrete, because that's realistically as far as it needs to go. I don't want to cross over any of the electrical work, so I'd like to bring the wall up as far as we can get to about the top of the concrete, probably about where the top of the paint line is, honestly. Yeah, bring it up as far as we can, and then I will make new cover boards to go over the electrical. And these cover boards did have access panels to get to the junction box covers, because you can't make junction box covers inaccessible. You can't put them behind things technically. So I want to make sure all those still have access. If I or an actual licensed electrician ever needs to get to it, they can. But I want to get rid of all the stuff that just does not need to be there. And I'm also trying to figure out where all of it's routed, so I know in the future, hey, this outlet comes down to this junction box, etc., etc. But yeah, that's where we're at right now. So I gotta start measuring and figuring out where all these are going to go. Okay, it has been a day or so, plus a few hours, since I started on the walls, or at least this one wall, the basement, and this is how we're getting along. I've been running my 1x2s at roughly 16-inch intervals, like regular studs. There are a few areas where I had to space them out a little differently, just because this adhesive is, getting it off there is basically a no-go. So like right here, for example, this space directly in between these two paths was nice and clean. I was able to get this stringer on there. Same here, I could get it kind of close to 16, with this glue path made it a little difficult. And I've just kind of been doing that for all of them. And at this point, if I go towards the front of the room, I am basically up to just a little bit, about halfway past the halfway point here. So I've still got that much wall to deal with. And I pulled the rest of the top molding down. I even did the boards that were over the top of the wall and the door here. And as far as I can tell, at some point there must have been wiring run in this channel right here that was kind of notched, and it's kind of haphazard. In fact, you can see the old some doorbell wiring up here that I'll have to move. I haven't done anything with the conduit yet. It's one of those. I want to wait until I get up I'll get all my stringers up, and I'm still working out a few of the electrical changes that I want to make now that I'm into this. One of them is I wanted to look at repositioning some of this. What I've concluded is that I don't really want to reposition the light switch, because then that means I got to run new wiring elsewhere, and I'd have to add extra junction boxes, cut more holes, and blah, 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 blah. I want to put shelving up against here. The end goal for this wall is, once the installation is on and the boards are up, and I put some sort of a either varnish or like polyurethane or something on it. I'm not quite sure what the walls here were finished with. I believe the boards here are actually cedar. I'm going to wind up going with pine tongue and groove just because of cost. It's a third cheaper, and I'm not made of money. So I'm going to try and stain and varnish them to kind of match the cabinets and everything. I'm not super worried about color, mostly worried about it. I don't need it exposed. I'd at least like it to have a sort of appropriate tone with the rest of the woodwork in here. I mean, not all the woodwork in here matches anyway. It was made out of whatever the owner had on hand, so, different species of wood, who cares? Either way, insulation, boards up, and then eventually I want to put in shelves. Now, at first I thought, okay, well, I could do concrete anchors and do similar shelving like I had at my folks' house, which was the sort of the Rubbermaid rack system where you have a steel strip mounted onto a 2x4 stud in the wall with, I was using 3-inch screws, like decking screws to hold those things in there. And then you can put the little shelf brackets slot into those, and you can put a board across it or whatever. That's all well and good. But having done a bunch of concrete drilling in this wall, all I can say is there must be about 30% osmium in this frickin' concrete, because there are areas here where my hammer drill will just not even bother going through. Some areas you'll pass right through it with a little bit of effort, but some of these holes can take me 2 or 3 minutes to drill, even with good carbide tips. And arguably my Makita hammer drill that I got at the pawn shop is a little worn out, but hey, it was better than trying to buy a brand new piece of junk from Lowe's same day. It's working. But I've had to do a few places I've had to reposition holes, and I have snapped off my fair share. These are not Tapcons. These are Simpson Strong Tie Titan Turbos, spelled incorrectly, T-I-T-E-N, whatever. They're working, but it feels like they're made out of cheese. Some people suggest that they're made out of aluminum. It says they are zinc plated with a ceramic coating. I don't really care. All I know is they just feel kind of flimsy. I haven't tried putting a magnet on to see if they're actually aluminum or not. They feel like they could be, though. So I'm over drilling all of my holes just so that maybe a quarter to ½ inch deeper, like recommended, so that these things don't hit the end of it and then strip out. Because I've had a few that stripped out and they deform threads very easily. So these are a one and done. You get it in there and leave it alone. A few of these, actually, they didn't want to actually tighten, so I just whacked the head of them with a hammer and it set them in there good. So once the boards go up, I couldn't give less of a crap about it. Because all these are going to be doing is as a place to nail each of the tongue and groove boards. They are not going to be used as load-bearing supports for shelving. Because what I'll wind up doing is the shelves themselves will actually have supports that go down to the floor and then come all the way up, or at least that's what I'm figuring on doing. I consider using the rack system, but honestly, the amount of work it's going to be to actually put the anchors in and everything. Once the boards are up, I don't want to have to drill concrete holes all the way through, because that's going to require a ridiculously long bit to actually get in there, and then the actual strength of everything, I don't want to deal with that. So I'm going to wind up building shelving that can support the weight of my my radios, because what I'm figuring is I'm going to do all the shelving up here, and using this chunk of wood that I had left over here, which is about 14 inches wide. I went and checked most of my tabletop sets from the 30s, and 14 inches it would be a perfect width. Most of them are about a foot wide. However, one of my GE sets from about 35 is pretty deep, and 14 would be much more comfortable for it because I don't want it pressed clean up against the wall. So the hope is I would have shelves up here, and all of my tabletop sets, or at least as many as I can possibly get, would wind up on this surface and not being scattered to the four winds, because I got them all over the place. They're on the floor, they're stacked on top of each other. It's a mess. So all the ones that I like and I'm keeping for the most part would be over here on this wall, out of the way, and it'll save me a lot of living room space. But outside of that, right now what I'm looking at is what I need to do to the electrical while I'm in here. And also, I had considered using this old chimney connection as a ventilation port. However, because this is one of two vents in the system, one going into the other side of the basement, I realized that if I was to put a vent fan in here, that it would be trying to, and unless I actually mounted the fan in the chimney itself, to act as a draw, I'd wind up possibly blowing air into the other area instead of it all going out the chimney, because it's just a right angle. It just it hits the back, and it might try going off and going into the other section, and I don't really need that. And I realized I don't really I try not to do any painting or spraying in this room. It's kind of small, and the other portion of the basement is where I tend to do more of the woodwork or spraying stuff. Or if I can do it, I do it outside. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to permanently cap off this hole here. I'll wind up putting a board across it and just cover the whole damn thing up instead of having to worry about it. Now, I did vacuum the living crap out of the inside of there, so most of the junk that was in it is gone. But I would like to seal it off, and I'll probably use some sort of a caulk around the caulking around the edges there to get a good moisture seal, because I don't really need water or anything coming back through it. So we'll cap that off, and I already had this one thing cut halfway up to make space for it. But I think I'll just cut a piece of plywood or a board that I have, put it over there, and it'll be fine. That went on longer than I anticipated, so I am going to keep slowly plugging away at these last two guys right here and get the tops and bottoms anchored, and then cut a few more for the end here before the end of the day. Okay, progress time. This is where we're at with the wall. Left side, completely insulated. Really happy with that. Right side, almost done. I am down to the last two strips of insulation, only to realize that I didn't have any more 16-inch insulation rolls. I'm actually using this foil back-sided thermal something or other. It's mold doesn't grow on it, there's no paper products in it, so that works adequately well, and the temperature difference between the two is quite nice. It doesn't have a massive R value or anything. I think maybe 2 with only a single air pocket behind it. I think if there's 2 air pockets, it goes up to like 3.7 or something. Doesn't really matter. I just wanted some kind of thin insulation of the walls behind the tongue and groove that'll go over it. Drilling these was a pain. I got all of them in eventually. It took 3 or 4 carbide bits until I finally got one that was diamond tipped, and that made the last section go a lot faster. The rest of these were a week's worth of work just to get those things anchored, and then putting the insulation up was a snap. Now, as far as this central outlet circuit goes, I got my box in, I got my flex run. I looked through the National Electrical Code for instructions on how you're supposed to deal with using flexible armored cable behind walls, if you could leave it loose or not, and I couldn't quite seem to find anything that clearly stated yay or nay. A lot of contradictory information from different sources, but a lot of things seem to point out that you kind of want to anchor them at maximum a foot away from their endpoints, whatever object they're entering or exiting. So just to be safe, I put some straps and anchored those to the wall on there about a foot from each of the boxes that they're at. And that should provide enough rigidity. And since it'll be behind a wall, it's enclosed, it'll be all right. Now, one of the problems that I have with this house is the fact that there is EMT here, but at the time it was installed, there was no requirement to run a separate ground conductor in the circuits if the EMT itself was grounded to a water pipe. And in my case, it is in at least 2 places, which is nice. Unfortunately, that also only really works if the mechanical connections between the EMT and the boxes are kept up and maintained tight and all that jazz. And you can see over time they discolor, they start to oxidize, and that kind of ruins the grounding potential a little bit. And there's a lot of junction boxes between here and my panel. There's probably 1, 2, let's see, 3, 4, probably 5 different junction boxes, which is 2 points of contact. It's like 10 different areas where you could have a failure or high resistance. So that's kind of crap. So I borrowed a spool of 12 gauge ground wire, solid core from work, and I have been pulling, and I've successfully pulled new ground section for the feed back to the rest of the basement. And I've been going through the other sections and pulling ground wires there. And I just discovered that the outlets on the opposite side of the wall, the other end of the shop, are actually fed from this junction box. I thought this went up and did something with the heater. No, this is for the heaters on the other side of the room and for the outlets over there. So I'm going to have to delete the heater circuit and then push a ground wire through, and I figure when I delete the actual heater circuit, I'll just pull the ground through using that connection or whatever. I can't seem to find my fish tape. And same story down there. Got that box pulled with a ground. I've got a ground over to the workbench, which is nice. Haven't deleted the heaters over there yet, still got to do that. But I did get rid of the 2 lingering pieces of conduit and boxes that were above the old desk, and that were over there for that funky light fixture thing. All that's been cleaned up. Although I did run out of electrical box plugs, these little guys that cap off the connections. I need to get a few more of those and plug the rest of those up and get some new covers for them. But I got all the little chunks of wood stripped off the wall, and there's a whole box of that crap. It's ready to get tossed. But yeah, I am stoked with how far it's going. I've got to set up an electrical inspection to deal with this once I get it tied in. I just want to verify that I'm not maxed out on the number of outlets on the circuit that I want to use. I don't think I am, but I got to double check what breaker it's tied to before I go any further. And then it's going to be buying a whole bunch of these after that. Unfortunately, one of these I bought is just utterly horrendously warped. I mean, it's total crap. It's not even square to itself. So I only got one board out of that deal, and I'll probably cut that one up and use it over here on the wall to replace this topmost board section here that's been beat up a little bit. For reference, this wood up here and the beam behind it, this is the original front of the house. Everything that way is an addition that was built a year later. So that is the original outside surface of the house before they put the shingles on it. One other thing I wanted to mention is the lighting situation. Was I had a sort of plan in my head where I was going to reuse the holes in the ceiling, stick the new LEDs up their chains, and I pre-hung this one and got it plugged in. I've kind of changed my mind on that because the position of the lights in the shop are kind of even. So you got this one here, then that one there, and the ones over the bench over here. My problem is the ones over the bench are sucked closer into the beam. That's okay. The ones in the middle are kind of spaced out, I don't know, like 15 to 16 inches. But then the ones over this side and the other workbench are not equidistant. This one is about the same as its partner in the middle, and the one over my other workbench is pulled and sucked up against the center beam of the building. Which is really, I like symmetry, and it's annoying the crap out of me, so what I think I'm going to do, because that light isn't even centered over the workbench anyway, is I'm going to skip using the holes in the ceiling to install the new lights, and I am going, after I get the wall up, mind you, I'm going to get some 16-inch edge-glued common board, and I'm going to run it directly across these holes. Each one of these, I'm going to completely cap it from the center point all the way across there to where the new cover board will be over this with junction box access, obviously. To cover those up, that board will then get stained. I'll put some trim around it so it looks nice. And then I can mount my new LED lights directly to that. And as far as the wiring goes, I can put outlets on the center beam with flex. So one on either side of the beam for the middle, one on either side for the front of the room. And then I can bring it around because obviously this gap up here was purpose cut for wiring and then ripped out at some point because there's a whole bunch of holes in here. So I'll reuse that. And then I realized, okay, well, how am I going to get the light switch? Well, I wanted to put the light switch on the side of the door that's near the doorknob. It only makes sense. So what I think I will do here is check which circuit this outlet is on, because it's got flex that comes in from the back and comes in from the rear. I'll update this box to a new, this box is intended for plaster installations, but it works great when you don't have a stud nearby and you just need to mount it directly to a surface because the cover plate will cover that. I'll put a new one of those in, and new flex for the ground wire, obviously. And then I will put another one of these down at light switch height, and run flex between the new light switch box and this to act as a feeder, and then a wire can come out of the top of this armored cable, go over the top of the door, hidden behind the wood, and then come out to the beam and run to the lights and everything. And then to get to the other side of things, all I had to do is drill a hole straight through, and I can connect one outlet box to the other through the back knockouts. And that should work pretty good. I got to check though, because that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, that's going to be four receptacles, 5 I think if I include the light switch. I don't know if that. No, I don't think the light switch counts. Well, either way, I got to make sure I'm not overdoing that outlet, because all the circuits in the house are 20 amp 12 gauge circuits, and there's a maximum of 10 receptacles. That's usually the general rule. So I'm trying to make sure everything is up to snuff as best I can. I also got to figure out what the hell to do with this 220 volt outlet that's here, because I don't know what circuit that's on. That never got labeled. And then the old outlet I have my computer plugged into, I have no idea what circuit that's on. So I got to check that too. So yeah, I got to. The main thing is wall first, but I'm planning ahead and trying to figure out how I want to run all the rest of the electrical, so that it all comes out nice and clean. And I kind of got to get the wall up before I can do anything over the ceiling. I kind of want to put some paint on it. It's kind of, I don't know, it's a little gross. But anyway, after the wall covering is up, stain it. Probably use either varnish or polyurethane. Polyurethane would probably be best. I think it is a type of varnish. And then I want to build some shelves, and I went back and forth about what type of shelving I wanted, and what I think I've settled on is, I don't know, it's kind of cliche-ish, is the using pipe fittings, plumbing fittings, much like Schedule 80 stuff, to build shelving out of. Partially for looks. I saw at least one other radio collector that did a pipe-style shelving unit for his collection, and I liked it. I like that you can set it up and you don't have to do a lot of sawing and cutting, but just buy pre-made cut to length and threaded pipe sections. But everything is the same size. But more importantly, because my wall is not flat, especially on this end, it tends to curve inward a little bit. I'm going to wind up using shims to make the boards at the top flush with everything else. But I can't really anchor much to these 1x3s. So I don't want to use rack mount shelving and put all the weight on those, because I really have to put concrete screws all the way through them. I don't want to do that. But if I use the pipe setting, pipe fixture, whatever, I can use flanges against the floor to take the bulk of the weight, and if I have to, I can anchor those to the floor for like earthquake readiness or whatever. That is a possibility here. And then I can just have flanges that will just have, wood screws that attach the backs into the wall, and that'll keep the thing from shifting over. Most of the weight will be pushed directly down into the floor, and with it anchored against the wall, it won't go anywhere. And I think with stained 16-inch wide boards to accommodate some of my wider sets, I think that would look pretty good. But that's where I'm at. Yeah, I am excited. So I just wanted to apologize for not really having anything interesting to look at on the channel recently. I've just been too damn busy trying to get this going, and I've been sitting on this since I've had the house, honestly, and it just needs to get done. Anyway, I'll keep you posted, and thanks for watching.